The aroma of jollof rice and pepper soup wafted through the humid air of Lagos, drawing hungry customers to Mama Glory's food corner like moths to a flame. Behind the steaming pots and well-worn counters stood Glory Okonkwo, a 52-year-old widow whose reputation for both delicious food and a sharp tongue had become legendary in the neighborhood. "Wet a new day look," Glory snapped at a customer who dared to complain about the portion size. "My food no be for poor people. Pay or comet." The customer, a regular who should have known better, quickly placed his money on the counter and scurried away with his takeaway container. This was the daily drama at Mama Glory's, where patrons endured her notorious temper for the sake of her mouth-watering egusi soup and pounded yam. Since losing her husband 7 years ago to a sudden heart attack, Glory's demeanor had grown increasingly bitter. The local women whispered that her character was the reason she remained single. No man in his right mind would dare to court such a difficult woman. But there was one customer who seemed immune to Glory's harsh words. Kelvin Okafor, a 25-year-old struggling graphic designer, would arrive each afternoon with a bright smile that somehow managed to crack Glory's stern facade. Their unlikely friendship had begun 6 months ago when he first stumbled into her restaurant, barely able to afford a plate of rice. "Mama Glory, your jollof rice sweet pass my mama oh no," he had declared that first day, earning a rare smile from the usually stern woman. From that moment, something shifted in Glory's heart, though she fought hard to suppress it. As weeks turned to months, Glory found herself looking forward to Kelvin's visits. She would save the choicest pieces of meat for his plate and often wave away his attempts to pay. "Keep your money, my piken," she would say, her voice softening in a way that made other customers do a double take. "You need it more than me." Soon, Glory began buying him clothes. First a new shirt here, then a pair of shoes there. When Kelvin mentioned struggling to pay his rent, she pressed an envelope containing 50,000 naira into his hands. "Take it," she insisted when he tried to refuse. "You be like son to me." But son was the last thing Glory wanted Kelvin to see her as. Each night, alone in her bedroom above the restaurant, she would stare at herself in the mirror, applying cream to her face and wondering if she could pass for 45. The 27-year age gap between them felt like an impassable chasm, yet her heart refused to listen to reason. One humid evening, after all other customers had left, Glory decided to bare her soul. "Kelvin, I need to tell you something," she began, her hands trembling as she wiped down the counter. "I know I old pass you well, but my heart no gree leave you alone. I don't fall for you." The silence that followed seemed to stretch for eternity. Kelvin's usually animated face froze, his eyes wide with shock. "Mama Glory," he finally said, his voice gentle but firm, "you be like mother to me. I no fit think of you that way." The rejection, though delivered as kindly as possible, shattered what remained of Glory's pride. That night, she didn't sleep. Instead, she recalled stories she'd heard whispered in the market, tales of powerful juju men who could bend love to their will. She had always dismissed such talk as superstition, but desperation has a way of changing one's beliefs. In the darkest part of the night, Glory made her way to the outskirts of Lagos, to a compound hidden behind overgrown bushes. The witch doctor, a small man with eyes that seemed to glow in the darkness, listened to her story without judgment. "What you seek is dangerous," he warned, "but possible." He handed her a small black powder in a leather pouch. "Add this to his food once every week. But remember, never taste it yourself, or the consequences will be severe." The following week, when Kelvin arrived for his usual meal, Glory's hands shook as she prepared his jollof rice. With a quick glance over her shoulder, she sprinkled the powder into his portion, watching it disappear into the red grains. The change was immediate and dramatic. As soon as Kelvin finished eating, his eyes glazed over, then focused on Glory with an intensity that both thrilled and frightened her. "Mama Glory," he said, his voice dreamy, "I never noticed before how beautiful you are." Within days, Kelvin had moved into her house above the restaurant. The neighborhood erupted in gossip, but Glory didn't care. She had what she wanted, a young, handsome man who doted on her every word. Under the influence of the charm, Kelvin became her willing servant, waking before dawn to prepare the day's meals, fetching water, and handling every aspect of the restaurant business. His family's intervention was swift and furious. Kelvin's mother wept at the sight of her son behaving like a lovesick puppet. His brothers threatened Glory with violence, then with police action. But each attempt to separate them failed. Kelvin would become aggressive, insisting he was acting of his own free will. Years passed. Kelvin's promising career in graphic design was forgotten as he devoted himself entirely to Glory and her restaurant. His youth slowly faded, but the spell kept him bound to her, believing himself deeply in love with a woman old enough to be his mother. Glory maintained her weekly ritual of adding the powder to his food, but as time went on, the guilt began to eat at her. She watched as the vibrant young man she'd first fallen for transformed into a hollow-eyed servant. Yet the fear of losing him kept her trapped in the cycle of deception. 20 years into their unnatural union, fate finally intervened. Glory, exhausted from a busy day at the restaurant, had prepared their evening meal. 2 identical plates of rice, one laced with the powder for Kelvin. She asked him to warm them in the microwave, something she had never done before. In his haste to serve the dinner, Kelvin mixed up the plates. Glory, too tired to notice, took a bite of the charmed rice. The effect was instantaneous. Her eyes rolled back, and she began to scream incomprehensibly, her mind shattered by the very magic she had used to enslave Kelvin. As Glory collapsed into madness, the fog lifted from Kelvin's mind for the first time in 2 decades. He looked around the familiar restaurant with horror as memories of his lost years came flooding back. At 45, he found himself a middle-aged man with no career, no family connections, and no future prospects. The story of Glory and Kelvin became a cautionary tale in Lagos, whispered about in markets and beer parlors. Some say Glory still wanders the streets, muttering about love and youth, while others claim she was taken back to her village to live out her days under the care of relatives. As for Kelvin, he tried to rebuild his life, but 20 years is a long time to lose. He opened a small graphic design shop, more to occupy his time than anything else. Sometimes, young people would come to hear his story, to learn the price of tampering with matters of the heart. In the end, the witch doctor's warning proved true. The consequences were indeed severe, not just for Glory, but for both souls caught in her web of desperate love. The local mothers now use their story to warn their children about the dangers of forcing love through supernatural means, reminding them that true affection, freely given, is the only kind worth having. The once bustling Mama Glory's food corner stands empty now, its faded sign still visible above the locked doors. But on quiet evenings, some say they can still smell the aroma of jollof rice and hear the echoes of a young man's laughter, forever trapped in time like the souls of those who once sought to bend love to their will. In the markets and streets of Lagos, when young people speak of love charms and quick solutions to matters of the heart, elderly vendors shake their heads and whisper, "Remember Mama Glory and her young man. Remember the price they paid for forcing love." And so their tale lives on, a testament to the dangers of attempting to control what should remain free, the human heart. In the end, Glory's desperate attempt to possess what wasn't hers to claim cost her not just her sanity, but also the very thing she sought most, love itself. The story serves as a reminder that true love, like the spices in Glory's once famous jollof rice, cannot be forced or artificially created. It must develop naturally, seasoned by time and nurtured by mutual respect and understanding. Anything else is just a recipe for disaster.